Hi everyone, my name is Evan Wong and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox, a leading no-code automation platform. In my role, I work with many enterprises and government to help them transform their business through automation, primarily through using no-code as a medium. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase RPA or Robotic Process Automation, but today I want to talk about another term that's similar, and I want to introduce you to EPA. Expert Process Automation, which is really exciting as the next evolution of RPA. When you think about the ideal HR team, you're thinking a team that effectively helps employees improve their satisfaction, their experience, and their growth. But unfortunately, research shows that 39% of HR teams spend their time on manual admin tasks. Now, this is attributed to things like record keeping of employee data, creating and managing job postings, drafting documents like agreements, terminations, notices, and calculating and managing the remuneration and entitlements around the staff. But it's not that HR teams don't have technology. It's not that we're not using technology. In fact, HR teams have been early adopters of tech, leveraging things like payroll systems, HRISs, recruitment and talent acquisition systems, which have been in place as part of the HR stack for quite a while. So I guess the question is, if we're using so much tech, how can 39% of our work still be so manual? Well, the answer is that this type of technology is built to serve a very particular purpose. We call them point solutions. And because of that, we end up having to use a lot of Microsoft Word and Excel to act as stopgaps for problems that aren't actually solved by these larger systems that specifically handle things like payroll, HR information, and recruitment. So we're still stuck doing a lot of manual mail merges and documents and phone calls and macros and Excel spreadsheets in order to actually get our work done. And that's what's making up that manual work. Now, I mentioned point solutions earlier, and it really is part of the problem. We have a very heavy reliance on point solutions as HR teams. And what that means is that they're really great at solving a very specific problem. They tend to be core functions of the HR business. But there are many things that sit all around this that aren't actually addressed by the group of different softwares that you see here. And so because these point solutions are so purpose-built, they become inflexible, such that most HR teams find that their tech stacks are not meeting the unique requirements of their organization. Because point solutions are effectively off the shelf and every organization is unique in your policies, your values, and the way that you actually run your HR function, it's never going to be able to solve all the problems and solve the problems in a way that you would like them to solve. In fact, this is really highlighted by the HR Research Institute's recent survey question. What are your biggest pain points in regard to your current HR tech stack? Now, I don't know what your answer is, but your colleagues, as part of this survey, have identified these 10 key pain points. The first is actually not enough in-house technical expertise. As HR professionals, we don't know how to code. We aren't expected to have a systems thinking mindset. We don't come from that background, and nor should we. And so it becomes really hard for us to actually stand up, maintain, and really utilize the technology in our tech stack in an effective manner. You can see that the second reason is not enough solutions exist for what we need. And that goes back to my point earlier around all of those different, all those small use cases that sit all around our day-to-day work that can't be solved by these more larger core systems. There's other factors there around not being user-friendly enough, out-of-date functionalities, and also too many competing solutions and components as well. And ultimately, what this leads to is inefficiencies. Because these point solutions or our existing tech stack can't solve all of our problems, we can't utilize them to their full potential, we we reduce the adoption, we reduce the actual usage of our tech stack. And that's ultimately going to drive us back to Excel spreadsheets, to macro infested Word documents and those Excel spreadsheets. And so it ends up being a very inefficient and manual way of running the HR function. And we end up becoming glorified administrative experts rather than people and strategic partners of the business. And this does have a knock-on effect to, of course, poor employee experience as well, because we're spending more time in the process and less with the human-to-human interactions. And that's really where EPA comes in, expert process automation. The best way to think about EPA is, well, you have professional work, and for the things that cannot be automated, we go down the right-hand side and we have humans for that. But for the things that can be automated, but it does not require an expert, we have RPA, Robotic Process Automation. So think of all those use cases where you're simply taking data from one system and copying and pasting it into another system. It might be from a form that an employee has just filled out, and you're taking the details and you're plugging it into, say, your payroll system. And let's say you're doing a batch of 150 as a new cohort. That's quite tedious for a human to spend time on. And therefore, you want a bot or an RPA application to be able to automate that. But there are also areas in professional work that do in fact require not just a human, but specifically an expert, a HR professional, because you know the process, you know the policy, you're an expert and you understand remuneration and calculations. And in that case, that's where EPA falls in. It is where we still have largely rules-driven, process-driven work that we do as expensive and high judgment experts, but it can still be automated. And that's really where EPA sits. And it's really the interplay between EPA and humans that make it different from RPA as well. When you think about EPA, it really is the next sort of evolution in the sense that it is moving up the value chain. Whilst RPA is replacing human type work, EPA is replacing expert, expensive time type work. And because of that, it often may kick off as an automated process, but pull in the experts, pull in the humans back into the loop of the workflow as required. Or perhaps a human might kick off a process and it might flow into EPA as a midway point in the workflow. Now, to make it a bit more concrete, EPA effectively is all about what expert-driven processes exist. And there are really 4 different categories here. The first is intake and triage of information. It's really every single interaction that you have in being able to collect information from new staff or managers in order to do your work. The second is analysis. When you have that information, how do you then guide the users to an expert conclusion? So this might be in the form of, say, is this employee eligible for these entitlements based upon a variety of factors embedded in our policy? It might actually be automating the calculations behind a complex remuneration structure that involves elements of grandfathering or elements of bonus structures and commission structures. It can be automated. It's rules-driven. And EPA is also about workflow, facilitating the input and approvals from many different users throughout the organization based upon different thresholds and parameters that you set. And finally, the outputs is really around the generation of bespoke documents, whether that is letters or agreements for every single bespoke employee that can be generated in bulk from EPA. And so what that really translates into are use cases like forms automation, where we're looking to deploy perhaps staff surveys into the organization. Performance review is one of the EPA use cases where you can actually facilitate a digital 360 type of performance review process. You can deploy very bespoke employee onboarding, where you're not only capturing the information of new staff, but you're also triggering the provisioning of all of the access to tools and resources and all the communications to all the managers and all the stakeholders involved, and of course the new startup. And a really popular one is really the bulk generation of employee letters and agreements, which we'll touch on in a moment. But the best thing about EPA is that it is absolutely no code. It means that it's built for the business user. It's built for the HR team. It means that you don't need a coding background. You don't need technical expertise. You simply use drag and drop, and you're able to build all the tools that we just talked about, but build it in a way that is bespoke and custom to your organization, to your policies, so that you can solve all of the sort of rigidity around the off-the-shelf solutions. It's really about being able to create software that works around your existing processes and policies, rather than working your processes and policies around the technology that you buy. And this doesn't mean that we're replacing IT in any way. IT is going to be a very important partner in the governance and the rollout of a no-code organization. And it's really going to free IT teams up to be able to focus on the high-value impact projects, whilst really enabling the grassroots creation of digital applications within the business users. So it's super, super exciting. And in fact, Deloitte actually called this out a few years ago. They said, while cloud-based HR systems brought tremendous value to organizations, they are no longer enough. Today, HR teams are rethinking their solutions in the context of workflow embedded apps. This means using the cloud as a platform and building on it for company-specific needs. And this has been definitely validated in the market. In fact, Checkbox as an EPA platform has won over 13 awards globally and are trusted by many of these big brands that you'd be familiar with. Now, what I want to do today as well is really show you some real examples of EPA in action. So for this use case, I want you to imagine that your organization is about to undergo a big restructure. As part of this, the people and culture team are tasked with being able to generate redundancy letters and new employment contracts as people move into their new roles. Now, you may have hundreds or tens of thousands of employees, and all of this has to be processed before the restructure date is announced. You also need to generate and send out all these agreements on the same day so that there is minimum confusion and friction in the change management. Obviously, a very impossible task without automation, being able to create all this manually. But using EPA, you can actually create all of this and make it possible in just a few minutes. So what we're going to do here is go and import a CSV that contains all of the employee data, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employee data. And what it does is it automatically creates those documents based upon a whole bunch of different parameters, such as remuneration, time with the firm, start date, and perhaps even the entity that they're going to be restructured into. So this is loading, and what it actually creates is it feeds into these dashboards where you can actually see all of the different statuses of the offers. We have 80%, say, pending acceptance at the moment, some in progress and some completed. We can even see some of the agreements have been rejected, and perhaps the reasons for those rejections. Some people going on paternity leave, some people moving overseas. But let's go and check out a record from, say, Sarah Jane, who has completed the actual the employment contract. You can see here there's both the employment contract and the redundancy letter generated for Sarah Jane off the back of that CSV import. And if I go and open this up here, let's go over here. You can see here that the document for Sarah has been generated with the letterhead and the signature, and it's really bespoke for Sarah. So all of her probation periods, her start dates, even the fact that she has a probation clause has been included specifically for her. All of this content is conditional. You know, the clauses can be included or excluded depending on a bunch of parameters. And really, if I scroll down here to the end of the document, you can also see even the calculations around the remuneration. Things like over here, the position as being a lawyer, her manager being Dana Blue, and the base salary, fixed remuneration, and all of the different factors here all provided and ready for signature, which we also facilitate electronically as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this session in learning more about EPA and been inspired by some of the use cases that we shared today. There is so much more to EPA and so many more use cases to cover. So if you want to see them live in a live demo, please reach out. My email is right there, right below, evan@checkbox.ai. And if you want to read more about EPA, Checkbox, or those use cases that we talked about, then simply head to our website at checkbox.ai. I look forward to speaking soon. Thank you.